We're live.
It's the magic.
We'll call the meeting to order. I'd make a motion to adopt the agenda as well.
Second aye.
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 Review possible action on substitute daily rate.
Okay, so having issues with some of these long-term and situations, substitutes, in order to find subs, including long-term substitute teachers, my proposal would be to look at possible options, and this is one of them that we can look at. Tier 1 would be no difference, $100 per day. Tier 2 would be like for instance, a maternity or a FMLA type of leave where it's not quite, there's a specified return date, and suggestion would be go to $150 a day, and that I put just after day 16, but that day that could be anything or any day in the same assignment. So that's kind of a temporary long term, but it's just we know it's not going to be too extended, but it's going to be for several weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, whatever. Tier 3 could be a long-term contract or a $200 per day contract, for example, with an unknown return date. We have a situation like that now. Just have discussion on that, and I'm going to open that up.
Could you explain to me in a normal year what the different sub certificates are and the days that are related to those?
So in a normal year, we have certificates. This year, for the difference is because of COVID, they've opened up all of the emergency subs and any sub license, and there's no limit to those. You can teach all year, as I understand it. That's been the difference. In a normal year, you couldn't do that. You'd have, for instance, and you guys will have to help me remember what they all are. Emergency subs, I think, is 15 days or.
Some of them are 15 days in one assignment. Some people might have 30 days in one assignment, and then they have to leave that classroom. They can't be in there anymore. They have to take a day break and then do something else that day, so.
And those are both called emergency sub certificates, okay. And there's a 30-day and a 15-day, okay, and then.
And there's a typical, just a substitute license, which is a normal substitute.
And then what's the difference between a substitute license and an emergencies?
They can teach longer.
There's no stipulations
There's no
on
stipulations,
how many
On a
days.
substitute license.
right?
But I mean, as the person with the license, is there different qualifications between an emergency sub and do you have to have your degree, between a sub and an emergency sub?
You have to at least have a bachelor's degree for the full sub.
In any, but a bachelor's degree, thank you.
For the sub license or emergency sub?
Is that
You
correct?
need an
Not for emergency.
You need an associate's degree in order to be an emergency sub.
That's what, okay, thanks.
So our regular substitutes that we have during the year, all of them have bachelor's degrees or they have associate's degrees? I thought there was something in there for 60 hours.
We have a little bit of everyone in there.
Yeah.
So what is that one? What is the
60 would be
hour?
the associates, emergency sub.
60 is associates, emergency sub, and most of those are 15 days.
Oh, because they're only limited to, okay.
But 15 in one class,
In
in one
one-
assignment,
Yeah, and then
and
they
it's
can,
consecutive
then they can only do so many days a semester.
with the semester limit, okay.
So-
That semester limit is, but
I can look it up for you here.
Good.
I wanna say maybe,
60.
I'm not, I think right off the top of my head here.
So when I look at this then, is the tier 2, that's not consecutive days, that's days period.
Well, essentially an emergency sub couldn't do tier 2 at this statement.
Because it would end at 15 days, but
Yeah.
my question is that 16 days consecutive, or is it, what if somebody goes in and does 10 days one time and they go back to that same class and do 7 days, that's 16 days. So do you change that rate to that for the rest of the year?
Well, I think that's what's up for discussion.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I mean, there's questions I have on some of these, and that's my question there. I'm trying to figure out how this is written to make sure I understand how this is written
So
right.
technically, a 15-day emergency sub would never qualify for the tier 2, the way this is written,
If it was consecutive.
if it was
Well,
consecutive.
but they may, because if they went back to that classroom later, because then it would fall into tier 2, would it not? The way this is
Yeah,
written.
no,
Because
yeah,
this does not have
'Cause if you did-
consecutive, it
If you
just says
did
in the
12
same
days
assignment.
and you come back and did another 10 days, you're gonna fall into tier 2, so then does that retroact back to day 1? Because that would put an emergency sub into tier 2.
Oh, because they're going back to the same assignment
Right.
they had,
Correct.
even if it was 2 weeks
Correct.
later.
So during the course of the year, if you put in 45 days in that same assignment, you're gonna be in tier 2.
They're consecutive days.
well, that's not how we wrote it, so.
That's not how this is written, that's
Well,
what I'm saying.
and this is just
Yeah,
up for
so we can
discussion.
decide, yeah, we have to decide,
Right, that's
yeah.
why I wanna make sure I understand how this is.
And to answer David's question, some substitutes that can sub no more than 15 days in the same assignment can substitute up to 60 school days per semester. So,
60.
And that was for the emergency or.
The emergency 15-day sub,
this one has, no more than 60 days. She has an associate, so that, and then you have some that are limited to no more than 30 days in the same assignment. Most of them are there's a lot that are no more than 30 days, and you probably have some kind of degree, you've had a bachelor's degree. But the ones who could do no more than 15, you have an associate's and no more than 60 days in a semester.
so the 15-day emergency subs are the only ones with the semester limit. Okay,
And that's the 60.
and that's 16.
And that was last year's rules. This year,
Well,
And
that's the
and it'll
standard
be
rule.
next year's rule.
Yeah, okay.
So this is really a 1-year thing. I mean, this is.
And that was what my question was, cause like if we're wanting to reward people to be more than 1-day subs, then you can't go more than 15 days, then
This doesn't
This
do that.
unless it's not consecutive.
Well, we also have to remember that as we might probably have some paras that would make now more money subbing
Absolutely.
at tier 2 based on hourly
We
rate.
don't have a lot of those situations come up. I mean, in a year, like a tier 2 type of situation.
You meaning that we would need a tier 2.
Right.
So so a para who might make less than 150 a day para-ing, would it be like, well, I just wanna be a sub now, cause
I don't think that you wouldn't wanna switch your jobs to do that.
Well, and after,
They don't happen often enough to,
and after
I
this
just throw
year,
that out there
we would
because
never
like,
have a tier 3.
One, you wouldn't have insurance.
and you wouldn't have insurance.
Right,
Right.
you would get insurance, so you'd lose benefits on any of these tiers, correct? From the way I look at this.
um,
Or are there benefits with any of these tiers? When looking at it, it doesn't look like.
Tier 3 was.
So maybe tier 3.
Well, we talked about that a little bit, and what was the,
30 hours was the
so
limit.
30 hours is the minimum to get insurance.
That's right.
And then you also told me earlier there was another, something we had before that's not on here, but you and I talked about it today. There was something totally different. I mean, maybe we'll wait and talk about that till we get through this, I don't know, but I know there was something else you was talking about.
You mean what we have had in the past and that we have used?
Whatever was the practice that we used.
Or the practice we've used in the past, and this is part of it, substitute teachers will be employed as needed on a day-by-day basis, and the principal of each building or acting principal will be responsible for acquiring the substitute teachers. The pay for a substitute teacher employed on a daily basis will be $100 per day. If the substitute teaches 16 consecutive days in one position, then this person will be advanced to where they would normally be placed on the currently adopted salary schedule if they hold a valid teaching certificate. And that's what the difference between this
Except
year
right
and
now,
where we've been, yes.
anybody will
Not-
have, with a bachelor's degree would have that teaching certificate, correct?
No, not a teacher
Not-
certificate.
You have to have it in education.
Non-certified substitutes will not be advanced into leave on the 16th day of consecutive substitution. Just the last line. Which, we've used that for years and years. This year, we've got some unique situations with long-term and with them changing the rules, it's kind of opened it up a little bit more this year.
But what we're talking about right in this little section right now isn't really our unique situations, as if we wanna have a policy change in general, right? I mean, it's more not about anything in particular at this point. This is just, in general, as a school district, is this something that we wanna
If
move
we wanna
towards?
vary from what our policy is now, we have to change policy for everything.
Gotcha, okay. I just
So
wanna make
that's
sure
what
we're all on the
all
same.
we're talking about right now is policy in general.
Okay,
Can I ask a question? Is there a paper to look off of so we could follow?
Here's your,
It's a little harder when you're talking about it, you're looking off paper, and it's hard to follow what you're
I've got
talking
that.
about.
Yeah, Brent has a
Little
copy.
hard to do it.
here's,
okay, question, but it just left.
And new policy is not necessarily connected to the old policy, meaning that if we establish new policy, there isn't a retroactive or a back pay situation to subs, or is there?
That's something we'd be talking about in this
So
policy.
that would be an amendment, or essentially in addition to
Or a
potential.
decision we'd have to make.
Yeah,
I think based on what we talked about, is that this is for a temporary, through the end of this school year, is that correct? Joy? Help me if I'm
I
wrong.
don't know why we wouldn't just,
Well, you're not gonna have tier 3 after this school year.
I would think you would not have it, yeah, tier 3 would not be
You'll never
in,
be able to have the days to teach every day on the license in a normal year.
what if they're on a sub license, not the emergency?
They'd still have 60 days per semester. So you could only teach 120
Are you talking
days.
about someone who has a degree in
Uh-huh.
education?
Not in education, I'm talking about a sub with someone that has a bachelor, so not an emergency sub license, but just a regular sub license.
They are still subject to how many days? I'd go back and look on each of
Okay, I
each of
didn't
their
get that, okay.
certificates.
So all of them are subject to days limit.
That's where the 60
Except
day.
if you have a degree in education.
That's the only time it changes. No, when you say a degree in education, you're talking a teacher's license, or you're talking about a degree in
A
education.
teacher's license.
So you have to have a certified teacher license.
Okay, so make sure certified, so a sub with a certified teacher's license has unlimited days they can sub. An unexpired, just a normal license, and then one that just has a degree has some sort of limit.
Yeah.
We'll just say 60 for this.
30 days in one assignment is what most of those say.
Okay. 30 days max in one assignment.
So I think we all understand how tier 1 works.
Well, congratulations.
That's what we got now, so we don't have to discuss that one. Tier 2, well, I guess we ought to break these down by tier and just talk about each one, but so how many questions we have on tier 2, cause again, this says $150 per day after, and this is, I get what Kat said, because we can change the wordage here, but right now it says $150 per day after 16 days in the same assignment.
So that could be sporadic throughout, right? The way
Exactly,
it's
so
worded.
that means it's
That
not
should be
consecutive
16
days.
consecutive
So
days
you,
of the same.
consecutive days?
I think it should say consecutive.
well,
Because if you don't
But
put
do we-
consecutive in there, if somebody works 25 days in one class for a year for any reason,
yeah,
they would go back, and then you gotta decide, is it retroactive, is it from 16 through 25?
We had a situation several years ago where a particular teacher was retiring and was using up all their time. And something like this would be hit and miss, and you'd have to back up and figure.
Absolutely.
I think it needs to be consecutive days to be considered for, in other words, it's.
and it doesn't have to be 16
I
either.
was gonna say, we could make it 15 and make it an even 3 weeks or
10.
something, 10.
I would think something like this would more apply to like maternity leave or, an
Medical leave.
operation or something
Yeah.
where you need somebody in that position for 6 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever the case might be, and look at it that way.
So you're talking consecutive days in the same assignment, which would cover that. What happens in the case of the vacation bill though? That was gonna, it would fall in there if somebody was burning their time up, unless you
Not-
found a different sub to go in and change them out, but that.
Well, I'm talking, it was like 40 days or something, it was a lot, yes.
I think-
And I think everything with contracts and agreements and what have you, that's all been changed since then.
I think I'm okay with it being after 10 days, so after 2 weeks.
10,
So after 2 weeks, I'm just imagining someone covering a maternity leave, say it's a 6-week maternity leave, I would say after they're there 2 weeks getting $100 a day, they should get $150 the rest of the time. Is how I would do 10 consecutive days is
10
what
consecutive.
how I would, it's kind of meet in the middle.
I think if we don't lower it, we're never gonna reward that person.
Agreed, cause I think,
We can't, because if you're 15,
Very,
you
there's
can't.
very few people are gonna fit in that criteria.
well, especially if you're, only in the 15-day sub, you're only gonna get the benefit that 3rd week.
So then do you retro that back, or do you not?
I don't think we retro anything.
I'm thinking that overcomplicates it to look backwards.
So you go the 11th day forward.
Oh, I
11th
thought you meant
so on the 11th day,
previous in the year and the.
No, I'm
Oh, okay, that's what I thought you meant too.
1 through 10 are 100.
1 through 10 or
Right, so
100,
the
11.
11th day it would go up.
Let me ask a question based on some of the history. Usually, I mean, obviously like maternity leave is a known factor. And generally, don't you get someone lined up to take care of that teacher? I mean, would it make more sense to say, hey,
Starting,
teacher miss such and such is going to be on maternity such and such. We're gonna put you in that position rather than going back. Say, you understand you're gonna be, 6 or 8 weeks, be allowed for maternity week through the
everything,
FMLA.
12 max.
Just put them on that tier 2 and do that, so.
You mean not have the 10?
Yes, you're going to.
you mean from day one?
You're gonna,
Yeah, I mean, you could do
If
that.
you're doing maternity leave.
this is your deal, we've selected you to do that. Unless you generally put somebody in that position, correct?
That's how it usually works.
So you don't rotate anybody out on maternity leave. It's the
You
same
try, you have
person.
a long, what we call a long term
Someone's
sub.
gonna have an operation and we select you because you meet the criteria that we need. Let's put you on tier 2. To me, that makes more sense for tier 2 is you have basically hiring somebody to fill that gap for X amount of
So
time.
basically taking out the minimum days and just start, just going, yeah.
Here would be a crazy one then, since we're still in this pandemic. Somebody gets quarantined, and they're out for how many days? Was it 10, 15? So do they fall into that category? Whoever the sub
Yeah,
is.
but you'd only be 10 consecutive school days if you did
Yeah,
2
it'd be
weeks
less
worth of
than-
quarantine.
That's my question,
Yeah, I
somebody,
would
what's
say
the
no.
worst case scenario for
I
us,
think-
for a quarantine on a teacher? How many days is it possible they could be gone? Worst case.
If they're a close contact.
Be
They're close
20.
contact.
Or they have children.
Household contact.
So it could
Contact
be
could be
over
20.
that 10 days, so that's gonna, then that would fall into that also, correct? The way that would be worded, if you don't put the days on it. So what do you can, if you don't put a day on there, does day 2 become your an assignment area, cause now you're past 1 day?
Or, let's think about it.
Or do
Good
you put
question,
it
yeah.
in there, like what you're talking, the 10 consecutive days with a clause in there that maternity leave would be figured differently?
Well, and
Or so.
Or planned out, like
Medical.
medical maternity leave or medical or planned.
and maybe that should be considered as a tier because we're going to hire you to fill that gap for this period of time.
We could do 125 or you just happen to be in this job for 10 days.
COVID thing brings an interesting
It does,
point
yeah.
of view. But even at that, if you did a full 20 actual calendar days,
You're gonna miss more than 10 in school.
yeah, it's gonna be more like a 16 days would apply. Because,
But that's what we're talking about, you're talking if we do tier 2, if we don't have a different tier and there are some exceptions in there, then it's gonna, anybody that goes past 1 day would literally fall into tier 2. Because the 1 day is the tier 1. So you don't
Well,
have a
why don't
per
we put
day,
it-
if you don't have a per day on the same assignment, if you don't put some kind of days in there, then anybody that goes past one day is in tier two automatically.
in the same assignment.
So you'd have to put some sort of days, and I'm not saying, or you put another tier in there somewhere and say this is for
Well, and that's what I'm
medical slash.
kind of proposing,
maternity.
because when you have somebody that's gonna have a planned leave of absence for maternity or operations or whatever the case may be, I think we need the ability to say, hey, you meet the criteria for this job, we want you in there for this period of time. And then those people can go in there with knowledge that, hey, this is what I make. It's not, we go for 10 days and then our salary changes and what have you.
Well, maybe
We
that's,
want you
yeah.
to dedicate your time to this, we're hiring you for this, basically. And then if later in the year after that leave is done, then these other tiers apply.
Can we just call it planned
Yeah, planned,
teacher outage, not outage,
well,
but planned teacher leave?
planned leave or something, so.
Outage.
Not call it a tier, just put plan, whatever.
Well, that
I don't know
tier
how
can
you
be-
do it, cause look, you could have a surgery that come up, I mean, we're gonna have.
But that's still,
there's
that would be
several things.
planned.
Well, and potentially that might be something on like the tier 3 section, when you have a plan for X week or weeks, that's a long-term deal at the 150, or if you have one, say like our English position where we need you for the year, that's the due.
So let's think about this. So we're, okay, tier one, we get that. The second,
I think we
everybody's
clarified
happy that we're good with that. Tier two, there could basically be an unplanned and a planned long-term. There's either,
Yes.
it's like a 2A or a 2B, but maybe it's,
You could do a 2A, 2B, or do a 2
Do
and then,
3,
then
4,
then drop 3 and then drop.
because I
tier
think
4
COVID, a COVID coverage would be unplanned, but
I'm
yet they're
thinking-
in there,
I think
for
this applies better for the COVID.
right?
And I think with your long-term planned leave, yeah, I would
I think you
think
do
we would want the
125.
ability to select that person as the qualifications for that class, and we know they're gonna be long-term, and they know what
Keep
they're
it
gonna
up
make.
on this.
Okay, so let's
No.
talk through this.
So let's
I feel
stop
like
for a
we're
second.
going around.
If we talk, forget about tier 1, let's go to tier 2. If we did $150 per day, Mike brought up a good point. If you leave it at 16 days, the emergency sub's never gonna qualify. So you gotta drop those days. So if you dropped it to 10 consecutive days, that would put them in that somehow. However, if you go to maternity leave or a planned or even an unplanned operation, some people may have an emergency surgery or something, but anytime that there's a surgery or medical condition, can we put it in there another way where it starts from day one?
I think
I
we
think
should.
that's your point,
I
right?
think we should.
In a nutshell, that's
That,
what
that
we're
person is going to have to do lesson planning and grading, these kind of things,
So I
and we
think it
need the right
depends though,
person in
right?
there.
Is there, for like discretionary days for a teacher, is there a limit on how many consecutive discretionary days that they can take, or vacation, or?
Yeah, and it's with principal, or with administrative approval, I think you can take,
You can take 4
Or-
days and then you have to have administration approval after 4 days.
right.
So not
I'm
like
just cautious
somebody
about the
couldn't
word
take,
planned, because if I take a discretionary day, then that's planned. So
But it's not,
Planned
but it's just a
long-term?
deny.
a
Is it-
long-term thing, but just something to think about when you're,
Is plan long-term acceptable?
I'm just thinking, as if you plan something out, as if you just use the word plan, that could be tricky if you don't add like medical or.
We can just put planned long-term,
like if somebody took a 2-week
Yeah.
vacation or a 15-day
Plan long-term.
vacation that they're
But
planning
then
out.
that's not medical, so is that gonna fall into that? That's where you get into
I'm just
touchy
kinda
is.
Tossing that out there, see if it sticks to the wall, but
I would like the word medical in there to help me treat every,
Yeah, this gets pretty tricky with trying to figure out. Honestly,
I know after you and I talked,
what we've
you
done in the
kinda like what
past
you
has
like
always
there.
worked really well. It's just this year, we've had some really weird situations. And,
I wouldn't mind though having an official policy that's attractive to some degree, I mean, I don't know,
And
or,
that's what,
after this year, you probably would just need, I'm gonna guess, for the most part, you wouldn't need tier 3,
Right.
correct?
I think tier 3 is kind of off the table for our policy change, right?
You can have a
Well, if
policy
we go
change
back to
expiring at
what
the
we
end of the
had
school year.
before,
What'd you say?
You can have a policy change for tier 3 to expire at the end of the school year.
Gotcha, I'm thinking more long term.
Yeah, I'm,
if we go back to what you and I talked about today, because when I was talking to you, you said that what we used to use as standard practice covers us in about every case that we can think of,
has,
other than an extreme rarity. Is that correct or not correct?
well, it's worked well over the years. I can't say it's 100%. Works really great.
Yeah, can you say it
It
one
doesn't
more
come
time?
to 100%, so
Tell us what it
A
was.
lot of the schools,
read that one more time so they all hear that.
okay. The pay for a substitute teacher employed on a daily basis would be $100 per day. If the substitute teaches 16 consecutive days in one position, then this person will be advanced to where they would normally be placed on the currently adopted salary schedule if they hold a valid teaching certificate. Non-certificate substitutes will not be advanced in pay on the 16th day of consecutive substitute. We did, so that's worked out.
So it
Pretty
benefits
well.
people that have a salary teacher certificate, but not anyone that's like covering a maternity leave.
It doesn't change the emergency license one, I guess, it fixes.
Well, or the sub, remember you can have a sub license without a teacher's certificate.
This year.
No, in life.
You can
But
have.
it's the 15-day difference, right?
No, it's not, that's
Is
emergency.
that 15 day?
Emergency.
Well, an associate degree only gets you
Yeah.
15 days.
No, but there, you can have, if you can have a full sub license
As an associate degree, but you can.
with
only
a
go-
bachelor's degree with a 30-day max in assignment, but you don't have to have a teacher's license. So I could personally, I have a bachelor's degree, I don't have a teacher's license. If I decide to quit my job tomorrow, which might happen, who knows? I could get my sub license on a normal year, not this year, just pretend I'm on a normal year. And I have a 30-day max in any certain assignment and perhaps a max in a day, but I don't, this 15-day thing doesn't apply to me, cause I have a bachelor's
Yeah,
degree.
you would be limited to no more than 30 days in the same assignment.
So it goes from 15 to 30.
And then a max of 60 days total for the semester.
Right.
That one doesn't have per semester, that's basically just for your ones with an associate's.
Okay, so
So I
then
can
you,
work every day.
so you could work every day, you would just, yeah,
At
okay.
$100 a day, but I'm not getting any benefit, I'm not given any benefit if I do a maternity leave for 6 weeks. Right. In that scenario, because I don't have a teacher's license, so I wouldn't go to the salary scale on the 17th day. I'd still just make $100 a day.
Correct.
So that's why I think we still, so I would have, or 30 consecutive days, so 6 weeks, say 6 weeks, that would be my max. So I still don't think we're incentivizing any of our valued long-term planned subs that might not have a teacher certificate, but they have a bachelor's degree. If we don't, cause right now they're only getting $100 a day no matter what.
I have a question, this may be just a stupid question, but it popped in my head while you were talking about stuff, but could we, as opposed to specifically defining what the tiers are, instead create a range that is discretion upon,
Is it based on the person's experience within our district?
could potentially be, it could be based on several factors, like we've been discussing, but as opposed to assigning a specific amount, then we assign a range that the administration cannot go above based on any sub, whether it's for any reason. Am I making sense? So like if
I think the time set by KDS.
You can apply for a job and the salary range is X to Y. It's up to the employer to determine where they put you between that X and the Y. Which could be education factor, it could be work experience, it could be, several different things.
You have all kinds of issues.
You could have all kinds of issues, and so then that way they would have the flexibility.
You could come in and destroy that, so if the better negotiator is gonna have the better contract.
Yeah, it's like
that I like where you're headed with it, I just think that adds too much,
Hold on.
adds
Yeah.
too much to it for the administrators,
Yeah.
if we can,
So
for,
I'm
you know,
thinking,
simplicity, maybe not go
Like,
that route.
Why they're getting this, but I'm getting this, and,
right, and I
you know.
think that's, I mean,
Yeah.
which is what we're trying, which is what we're attempting to sort out, but
You're sitting over there, I know you put your input in a couple times. Michelle, I haven't forgot about you, I know you wanna talk, so we'll get to you in just a second.
No, I'm just thinking through the process and just asking questions to myself and
Michelle?
well, I don't think I got to finish my example
Okay. I'm sorry.
before we move on. Not that I didn't finish my example, but I just wanted more discussion. So if we have, you know, if Mrs. Paul has said, I need you to cover my maternity leave. And
That would be kind of crazy.
it would be crazy because you would never approve that. I know. They don't want me around the young for that many days in a row. But if, say, a person with a bachelor's degree that can have unlimited or 30 days in a semester. I'm assuming that's a planned activity that we all agreed 15 minutes ago that deserved $150 a day.
Yes.
So if we have, and I don't even know who we employ or what degrees they have, I'm just saying, I believe if we have a bachelor sub in a planned assignment, we all agreed, I thought, that they deserve a tier above the $100 a day. Because our practice, while it helps people that have a teacher's license, doesn't help some really probably wonderful subs that we have for our kids. As far as rewarding them for putting in the long term and doing all of that work. So,
Question. If you have a sub that's doing maternity leave
yes,
and they don't have a bachelor's, you don't put them in the upper tier? They're doing the same job.
well, they can, but they can only do it for so many days.
Well, this year we can
This
go-
year, that went away.
Well, not this year, sorry, yeah, but
kind of go forward.
I think it's on the go forward. It can be, I was just using myself as an example, having a
Right.
bachelor's degree but no teacher's certificate. But I would do that to any sub. I don't think it has to be a bachelor's degree sub. I think
so right,
but it goes back to if it's a planned a long-term assignment or whatever we decide to call it. And if we say long-term is planned more than 2 weeks or whatever we decide that planned.
So how have we handled that in the past? I mean, I know we've had maternity leave in the past, so how have we done that?
Someone who has an associate's or a bachelor's gets $100 a day for 6 weeks,
For every day.
every day that they're in there. If it's a,
So it doesn't matter whether they have associates or bachelor, they can stay in there as long as they need to with a maternity leave.
if it's a sub that has a teaching license,
They move to the salary tier.
the first 10 days they were on $100 a day, the 11th day or 16th day, whatever it was, they advanced to the salary schedule.
So the one that he just read.
Yeah,
there.
this one.
Yeah, that's what I have
And
followed.
the point I was trying to make is we have plenty of wonderful subs that we rely on as a district that don't have a teaching certificate.
Correct, but what I'm asking is, because I think she just clarified that, is it doesn't matter whether they have a bachelor's or associates, they would fall under that and get paid
$100.
the 100 to start with, and then it would change on
No,
whatever day.
no, it never changes if you don't have a teacher's
Teacher.
certificate.
Or if you have a teacher's certificate.
I'm with you. So the maternity leave right now is $100 a day, period.
Unless you have a teacher's certificate. And
And
then
that's
that,
not a substitute certificate, that's a teacher.
It's just that you're a licensed, you still have your license that's good till 2024.
and it's still valid.
You're registered with the state licensure department.
There's too many different types of licenses out there.
There are a
So,
lot
Mike,
of them,
thank
it's
you
hard
for
to
starting
keep
the
track.
meeting off with.
So if you take Troy's policy he read, ending if they hold a teacher's license, they go to the scale and say, if they don't, then go to the tier 2 language.
Yes,
Is that what you're saying?
That would be the same thing.
it's not the same thing.
No, I'm saying if.
He would keep
What he just
that.
said is if you use that language that he read, and then if they don't have a teacher's license, you go to tier 2,
Okay, gotcha, yeah.
which will give them
Take care of
$150 a day.
Yes.
And it gets us, I mean, this is only gonna be good for 1 year, is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
at the
Because
end
that'll
of the,
go away at the
at
end of
the
the
end of
school
the
year.
school year, we're gonna have to
Right.
go
Because
back to
then we'll
the
know what the
limited of
rules are.
15 days.
So essentially, we're taking our current in practice, adding a colon, comma. And if you do not have a teacher certificate license, you will move to the 150 days on day 16.
That's where you gotta decide on, do you wanna leave it at 16 or do you change dates?
I think you move it to
16
10.
seems like a long time.
I do too, I think you move it to 10, or if it's planned, don't have it, I don't know. It's almost like you have to have it for the person with the license, because they're jumping from 100 to quite a bit a day. What did we figure? 250?
When they go to the schedule, what, do they go to the base schedule? So,
Well, what we've done in the past is that the person would be placed on the adopted salary schedule where they would normally be placed. Some other schools don't do it that way.
So they're going from 100 to quite a bit.
yeah, I mean.
So at least
Or-
257 or at minimum.
228 minimum.
228 minimum.
228 minimum, so
When
A
they
lot
don't
of
do
the
schedule.
a lot of the schools in our area or right around us, they go to column 1, step 0 on the 11th day of a consecutive assignment.
So that would be the base of 41,350, so 228 or something like that.
Yeah. And there's 3 schools that do it that way, or 4.
And that's after 10 consecutive days.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
And a teacher's license, right?
So
Do they have a teacher's license tied to the ones that you and I talked about today? I think they did, didn't they?
Well, I mean, you have to follow the rules that they have on each individual, so the state does that for you.
so
It's pretty confusing.
no, but yeah, it's coming together. Believe it is, it's coming together.
Yeah, so you have the tier 1 and then tier 2, it's either you have a teacher certificate or you don't. You've got
That's really the
associate-
only
Yeah.
difference that I'm seeing,
Yep.
but I guess I'm still kind of confused because if you have a sub license, does that count would that count you for tier 2 or not? An emergency sub license.
It could, yes.
Could.
Cause you can go 30 days.
Well, really, that's the only basis for that, because everything else is covered by that policy you have there. So this is just like a 1 year coverage for those who don't have the teacher certificate, how it applies to them for the days they work.
That wouldn't just be for 1 year. Because you could have a sub license without a teacher certificate next year if I have a bachelor's degree.
Tonight, if you just wanna focus on this year and then this summer, you can
We
reevaluate
can
it.
extend it,
That's a good point.
we can adopt.
I would just,
adopt
yeah.
for next year.
We don't know what next year's gonna bring, the
True.
license you're doing.
Good point.
If we put this together as a plan for this year, finish it out the 21-22 school year, we can
Okay, so
revisit
Sorry,
it as
Michelle.
a bad
How
about-
policy.
we can go to Michelle now.
Michelle?
Sorry, we can go to Michelle before we.
I just wanted to discuss equitable compensation for the work that I've already done and have been asked to continue to do. And so far, with what you've got going right now, I will not be working for USD 420. So, do you have questions for me? I am not working as a sub, I am 100% fulfilling all of the duties of a teacher. There is no teacher to sub for.
I think right now we're talking about this policy, we're not
Yeah.
talking about.
We haven't even gotten to, that, so,
So yeah, if you wanna save me for later or whatever.
I mean, no, I don't.
I mean, that could fall into tier 3 though, right? So
Right, we
let's
have-
say we've got tier 1 $100 a day, tier 2 is now do you have a teacher certificate or not?
Yep.
And then tier 3 for this year could be do you have a teacher certificate or not? Because if in tier 2 you have a teacher certificate, we're putting you on the salary schedule. Why wouldn't we? Tier 3, again, if you have a teacher certificate, put them on the salary schedule. Or if you are associate or
A bachelor without a certificate.
bachelor, now you're at the 200, because this is long-term for this year. So that tier 2 and tier 3 are similar.
They would both have A's and B's.
So you're talking on tier 3, then you would go copy tier 2. And do what with it?
So, yeah, so tier 3 is just now an increased level, so now you know you've got this long-term situation. So I don't even know if you would bring days into it, of, hey, you have to get to 10 days before you,
Right, no,
because you now know, here is the long-term situation. And you automatically, with the teacher certificate, go to the salary schedule. Or associate bachelor, you're now at 200 instead of 150.
I see where you're saying, yeah.
You're saying with no days attached to it?
Because it's a planned long-term,
That's where we bring in long-term plan contract, like whatever it is, because
So benefits wise, what would you do there on that one? Is that one a little different than?
well, I think maybe that's where we have to bring in this wording of and if hours are expected to be equal or greater than 30 hours a week. Give me benefits.
And I get where you're going with this, so I don't mind that idea, except that the one thing would be is if you're gonna do that tier 3, then you're basically making that a teaching position from day 1. So are you gonna put the same requirements there, other than the teaching license?
Okay.
Are you gonna have the same requirements that they would have that a teacher would? I mean,
So it's like, what's
I
the
get what you're saying, so if
differentiation?
you're gonna do that, then I think you go to the schedule that's Monday through Friday. Those are the hours we're here, you get your benefits, you get everything, just like a teacher schedule would. It's just gonna be at a lower rate if you don't have, you're either gonna get the higher rate of the teacher pay, or you're gonna get the reduced one a little bit, but you're still gonna get all the benefits.
Right, could it be tied to? Cause I liked some of the wording that Troy had in here about there's a specified return date for some of these other things, whereas if it's an unspecified, you don't know what you're dealing with, then they jump to tier 3 for current year.
You mean go from tier 2 to 3?
Right, because in tier 2, potentially, the teacher has the ability to do plans and it's ready for you. Or they're just out for 2 weeks, let's say they're on COVID, right, because their family member is sick, but they're quarantined because the family member. Maybe they're still at home doing grades, but who knows what the situation is, but yes, like how do we differentiate to jump to tier 3? And I'm just thinking if it's an unknown timeline, for me, that adds to it.
I didn't even think about that one, that's a whole nother.
So I just don't think we would get to
I was
tier 3
thinking
off.
tier 3 was gonna be, is that not a contract date? You'd have a contract signed for tier 3, correct?
I think you would.
So tier 3 would be a contract, tier 2 would
Oh,
not be.
that's true.
So tier 3 in the contract, you'd write the contract that it's basically a teacher's contract with, here's how the benefits work, here's the hours of, what are the hours?
7:45 to 3.
7 what?
7:45 to 3:40 each day. And then are you saying that anybody can, like, any qualification can get paid that $200 a day? Or do they have to have?
No, this is a, for that tier 3, which be, go ahead and tell me what tier 3 was again, you guys help me here. It was a
It's a long-term.
bachelor's degree,
Oh,
With-
the A and B,
Yeah,
is that what you mean? Yeah, so the A is if you have a teacher certificate.
ones with a
Then you're on the
teaching
salary
certificate,
schedule.
you'd go on a salary schedule. B, if you didn't, it would go to the $200 a day, but you'd have to have a bachelor's degree.
And how do
Correct,
you
is that
think
how I'm
Or
reading that?
associate. So
I
that
guess
would.
my question is, like, how do you think that would make your certified staff that has the license? And would it make them feel less valued, only making $28 more a day than someone that hasn't gone through the rigor.
That's why we're having this conversation.
But that $28 is based on your different tiers and what have you, so if you're qualified, you can put more, that would be just minimum, correct?
Well, the way it's set up, the way most of these schools are doing it, they're going tier one, level one, whatever you call it.
Step.
They're not putting them on a salary. Now, the teaching degree, they're gonna have a salary schedule, is that correct, Troy?
Mhm.
But they don't have a degree, they don't have a teaching
Hours of
license.
Education, they would have a degree, possibly a master's, those kind of things, they wouldn't be working with $228 a day, they would be based on our.
If they have a teaching
Staff
license, they would go up,
tiers.
yeah. If they had a teaching, you're talking about
So
the teachers we
228 would
currently
be
have.
the minimum a certified
The
teacher would
confusing
make.
part about this thing this year is that they're considering everything a teacher's license. And that makes it very confusing. In the future, that wouldn't be the case. You see what I'm saying?
And then the other hope is you don't really get into this predicament where it's an unknown amount of time that you need to put someone on a long-term contract.
Well, let's back up for just a minute.
Back
I know
up,
this
Dave.
tier system was suggested to us. Is this something that the administration has any interest at all, or do you feel like this is needed, or are we wasting our time, or is this a tool to you?
Honestly, this COVID thing has made this confusing. I think what we have had in the past works a whole lot better, to be quite honest. If we weren't in COVID right now, and it's what's muddied the waters is the
So this is basically, at this point in time, would be a COVID policy to be looked at a later date, whether we want to continue it or not. then, correct?
So the call time out there is, this isn't, we're not, our problem right now is not based on COVID. We might be able to use
Well,
that as a
it's-
crutch, but our problem
it's-
is not COVID, is not why
No,
we're having this
it's
conversation.
it's what's caused the change is how they've changed the certifications. That's what I say, that's what I mean.
They changed the certification for COVID, we're changing
Right.
it for a totally different reason, we're not changing anything because of COVID, because that's not what our problem is. If it's based off COVID, we don't have a problem, we leave everything the way it is.
Yes.
We have a separate problem, we're trying to address it in a deal that we're getting it to a mix because COVID has nothing to do with what we're trying to fix
That's
it.
my point.
And whether we fix it for 1 year, we fix it for,
I'm just concerned that the suggestion had muddied the waters for what we really need to do.
I think there could be some value, some positive value, like my example of valued substitutes in long term. I think this could be an opportunity for us to reward some of them. So I don't think it's all for naught as far as muddying the waters, because I think there is some value in doing that.
I agree, I think that,
If this- if
I've
going
always
through
said
this
something's not
exercise
the best,
solves the
but
problem,
neither is any other teacher.
I'm all for it.
Right,
If we're kicking the can down the road when we really have a problem,
so we
that's a
just now started,
situation we need to
so,
address.
yeah. So obviously, we have a tier 3 situation. We have an open position that an unknown,
We can't talk about that, we're gonna talk about just the.
oh, sorry, policy. So tier 3 policy would be a long-term, or would include a contract. It would be when there's an open position without a return date at this point. And Kat, your suggestion would be $200 per day contract with a sub-license, whether it be emergency or regular, without a teacher certificate.
Right.
And teacher certificate would be a contract on scale. That's simple. I mean, it sounds confusing, but it's that simple.
Certified teachers
A cer- a
contract would
certi-
start from whatever, how do they do, what do they call that, Amy?
I'm sorry.
Teacher certificate?
No, that's
A
the
certified teacher certificate, what do they call the pay scale?
The pay scale that we
That's all it's
have right
called?
now, yeah,
Okay.
in our master contract.
It's just called pay scale.
Basically.
I have
I was
a,
trying to add a word to it.
I have a question. Troy made a comment earlier about the state, right now views everything as a teacher's license. So does that mean that regardless if you have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or even then that means that
They
you
just took
have
all
it.
limitations off.
So for
So-
this year, there wouldn't be a tier A,
So
there
for
wouldn't be a
this
3A.
year, everyone has a teacher's license that,
No, that's not what that says, because not everybody would have a certified teacher's license.
but in the eyes
Is
of
that
the
correct,
state
Troy?
for this year,
In the eyes of the state, they do.
so
Is that
that's,
right, Amy?
I was just, we were just talking that maybe instead of saying teacher license, that maybe you could put a education degree on it to make the stipulation different, as in just anybody, bachelor's, BA, so forth. That if you wanted to change that, that education degree would
Because this
make
year,
a difference.
because this year, the certificate is null and void, everybody would just fall into
Right.
it. Got it. An education degree, is that what you said?
That may be a term that you could use to make that different.
Dang it, I'm still not following.
Cause that could be our only tier 3 then, there doesn't have to be A or B, because tier 3 is for this year anyway.
Correct.
So it could be education.
So if you have an education degree, we already have a policy for that.
I think we have it, I think
Right.
Troy has it already, the only thing we're talking about
That
is,
applies for the education.
is that, the only thing we'll be talking
This would
about is
only
tier two.
apply is if you do not have an education degree and we're using you then in this capacity. E.g., not E.g.
An
I'm trying to simplify this.
education degree with a sub-license. So, I mean, you can have an education degree and not be
Licensed as
licensed, you could be retired
Or a license in another area.
or licensed in another area. You see what I mean? So you can have an education degree that,
with a sub-license,
with a sub-license, not a current valid
So
teaching.
that would be E.D. with sub license, your
Yes,
current policy.
education degree or ED with sub-license.
So then,
Policy applies.
I get all confused now.
oh, it's cold in here.
Stop getting, that's why I wore a sweatshirt, it's always
So
freezing.
this would be, it is called no E.D., sub license.
Okay, so now we're back to just talking to this year.
Alright, so I wanna go back to Amy's comment.
Okay, say it.
Amy, you gotta help me again, cause you're gonna have to explain this to me. Education degree, forget about license.
Right.
So anybody that has an education degree, the teachers, because your point was, how do you put them on a teacher pay schedule? Cause that's basically what we're gonna do if we do an education degree. That doesn't create a conflict with any teachers' unions for the remainder of this year.
For this year, I don't think it would, my only stipulation was this, is that that teacher license, because any of your subs, your AAs, your BAs, and anything else, they're considered a teacher license this year.
Right.
And so there's a difference if you have a license in farming and you come in and you're teaching math this year versus somebody who has an education degree who's gone through all the student teaching, all of that knows how to run classrooms, all of that, that would be a different experience. So as for an education degree for this year, that would be, make sure you could go to teacher license, because not everybody would have that teacher license. That's for this year, an education degree.
So then from our perspective, do we do a per day or do we put them on a teacher schedule? And if we put them on a teacher schedule, do you put them at level 1? Which is gonna be what's the tier 1?
41 through 50, yes.
So if we did that scenario, what you just said, you put them on that tier, is that how you do that? I mean, I'm asking what,
We,
No,
our,
it would go off of that language,
our old
Mr.
pol-
Hutton just read.
our old policy placed them on the schedule where they would have been.
If they have a master's with 25 years, I find that
so if
point.
they don't have, I guess that's where my question comes in, if we have a position that somebody has an education degree but no license and no background, nothing in teaching, where do they fall onto?
Well, if they have
I have a license.
a degree, they're gonna be more than likely certified with the state, so if their degree is still current. If a degree expires, you really cannot have someone come into your school without going through the Department of Ed, getting their license. It's very simple to do, very inexpensive if someone wanted to do it.
But do they tell you what, I mean, my question is, how do you figure out where they're at on that tier system?
How we used to do it, if they had a master's in 20 years, that's where I would put them, divided by the number of teaching days, which is 181, that's their salary per day. That's how I would have done it in the past.
And is that off of the years experience, not as subbing, but as in years in
Years of experience.
a regular classroom?
Teaching experience.
I mean, is there an easier way to, I mean, we're gonna do this for a 1-year deal, it's not gonna be
Right.
a 10-year plan, is there an easy way to just make that rate whatever?
I think we just still do what Patty's done. If we have somebody in that position coming in with an education degree, using the scale of whatever they call
Policy covers.
their current policy, their years. And there's,
Okay, so let's go back to current policy, and what do we add to the current policy if we're changing something?
I have one thing. I've had some of our subs, they did have a degree in education. They let their license lapse, because they're retired. When they go back to the licensures department, it then turns into a sub-license, emergency sub-license. Because I don't know what you have to do to get your 5 years or whatever when you to get recertified, Some of my retired teachers that had a degree in education, when they get to where they're 65, they don't want to go through all the work to update their license. So they have an emergency sub, but they do have a degree in education.
Now, is it an
Sounds like
emergency
a-
sub or is it a full sub?
No, it's still an emergency sub. If they have not,
Cause
Yeah,
emergency
credentials
is like 60 hours.
they're all considered emergency sub. You can have a
Even on a
bachelor's
regular year?
and it's still an emergency sub. If your license is still good, it is considered a
You're
sub.
just licensed teacher.
Some teachers retire and they keep their credentials up to where they can fall into that category. I have some that their license doesn't expire till 2025. They're not teaching,
They just have different limitations.
they just keep it up, something they wanna do. But I have some that have retired and not kept their credentials up, and that then turns it into an emergency sub. So they are educated.
They
It's
have a
just,
teaching degree, an education degree.
which for this year falls into that. But it goes back to, do you pay them on the scale that they had 45 years in a classroom daily rate versus, cause that's a big jump.
That's after 50
That's-
days too.
Well, still, but if you're gonna have a retired teacher coming back after 40 years of experience, they're pretty high on this pay scale. It's gonna be a very costly sub situation, but I guess maybe that's what we've already done anyway, if they become a long-term sub.
That's only if they're a long-term sub, but I think you can do that in a way that you can make that either level 1 or put an amount on it. Unless they have a license in effect, then it's not the same thing. I don't,
Okay, so tier 3,
I would hate to be the one doing payroll if I'm trying to figure out who's got what, where they got it, how they got it. I think if you simplify that down, we're gonna use either a daily rate or we're gonna use level 1 or level 2 or whatever level I get down, that's where it's at.
What if we use the current language but possibly raised the per day rate per sub? As
As a
opposed,
language in the.
which is currently 100 per day.
Yeah.
What if you raise that to
You're talking about
150?
this one right here?
Yeah,
So So it says the pay for a substitute teacher employed on a daily basis will be $100 per day. If the substitute reaches 16 consecutive days in one position, then this person will be advanced to where they would normally be placed on the currently adopted salary schedule. If they hold a valid teaching certificate, which everybody's gonna have that, so non-certified substitutes will not be advanced on the 16th day. So if we change that to whatever days we wanted to, maybe 1 to 10 day, whatever the date however you wanted to.
Why change
And then
the
you
day?
could make
Change the
the,
exception. I said, why change the day, why not change the exception? Because
and if you don't have to, you don't have to.
What was it,
Well, that's my question, so it says if it reaches 16 days, then the person will be advanced to where they would normally be placed on a currently adopted salary schedule. We could just put there that we'll advance them to level 1 of the pay
Well,
scale.
it makes the exception for the non-certified, I think that's where you put the position.
That's where the part 2, yeah, that's where your
That's
core
where
tier 2 would
Just
go
put
in.
tier 2 in there and you'd be done.
Does that make sense? If you use this exact language, except how many days, because we've talked all over the place on days, so if you went back to the 10 days, so you changed that from 16 consecutive to 10, then this person would be advanced to where they would fall on
I
level
guess
1 of the pay
that's
scale.
all I was saying, you know, your 16 days.
Oh, you wanna
Then
leave the 16 days?
It gives the exception there, read that again, the exception is this is for certified,
And
but
then there
this
would be
does not
education to
apply
see.
to certified.
So,
Instead of the exception, you would then state the same, that tier 2 criteria would fit in, would be.
And that over to tell you not put your notes on the bottom of that.
but I think what, Dave,
'Cause I'm getting
I wanna make
myself,
sure,
I'm going out
make sure
left
I'm
field
understanding
thinking.
what you're saying, Dave. So this is not the long-term contract situation, this is back to
It
the
would be
10.
both, because that would take care of the long term, and then what he's talking about is adding on like the maternity leave type deal into the non-certified teacher, correct? But there are no non-certified teachers this year, they're all certified, right?
Well, I don't think it takes care of a long-term, that doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
No, it doesn't, because,
That's what that's based on. After 10 consecutive days, you go on to the salary schedule.
so, oh God, so you're saying if you have an
If the
education,
substitute teaches 16 consecutive days in one position, then person will be advanced to where they would normally be placed on a current adopted salary schedule if they hold a valid teaching certificate.
so that goes away, the valid teacher, and then it's just if they
Leave
have
that
a
there.
education degree.
Non-certified substitutes will not be advanced to pay on the 16th day. You could change that. Non-certified substitute will be advanced to
The $150
tier 2 of $150
a day, perfect. An education degree,
You don't even have to take it, you don't even have to put the education degree in there, you just leave it alone, because it's gonna be for the end of the year, and then you change it at the summer. Cause everybody's got a teacher's license right now.
Right, so the 150 doesn't even
Right,
apply.
stipulation
Yeah.
difference.
And that,
Thank you,
like
Amy.
Amy would say, would be,
What'd you say again, Amy?
I like to be right, all I heard was Kelly was right.
She's saying that that's why we were talking about education degree, because I could come in with a bachelor's in accounting and go to the salary scale
you'd be
if
certified.
you leave
now.
it like that.
With the
Well, the
edu-
salary scale though, we say we put it on level 1, that's what I was saying, just make it level 1, then there's no doubt where it's at, and everybody knows where it's at.
so that's $228 a day, basically.
Yeah, you want, put whatever amount you want in there. Because you're also, when you go to that one, you're gonna have insurance and everything else. It's gonna come with full benefits.
I think we went backwards there again.
The way I understand it, if we're above 30 hours a week, ACA will make us have,
That's
we
correct.
have
Offer
to, we have to have insurance.
For so long in a year, not just a short term in the year.
No, it's
Yeah,
got,
I'm not gonna put it on someone for 6 weeks.
it's not
Right,
a, it's
only
not a
gonna be
tier
if you
2.
have a contract. What you would have, if you went to that, that he's got now, but whatever that verbiage is there, you would have a contract. Is that correct? Do you always do a contract when
Yeah,
you
you'd be
do?
basically
No,
just
none of
do-
this is contract.
Well, you don't do any of those with a
Yeah,
contract.
you'd be basing your pay upon, you know.
So that's why we're not talking about tier 3 in
current
that.
salary schedule. So if you say you, by the salary and step that you went through that schedule, that you qualified for, you know, $295 a day, we'll say, days that you work past this 16 consecutive days.
In the past, we have not done a long-term contract.
Right,
Just
that's
never
why
have
this,
done that.
this
But
is
we've never
just tier
did the
two.
insurance either, correct? Cause we just found out about that.
We've never had a long-term contract like we're looking at this year.
Okay,
Not in the 5 years.
so really that statement,
Once
I'm
I'm sure middle school.
that statement basically
can't
is
remember
the
what I
tier
just-
two
what I
conversation.
just read. Take a picture.
Can I take a picture, can I take a picture of this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we not just do a motion to
Yes.
handle the tier three, like with what you're talking about expiring at the end of the school year?
Yes,
So what are we talking about on, cause I thought this was tier three, this is not.
no, this is tier two,
This is?
right, that's tier two.
That's not the way we're understanding it, or not. We're thinking this is tier three.
What's tier 3?
So if that was tier three to you, then what was tier two?
Tier two was what we added at the bottom of it, is or you would be tier two. Because tier two is not gonna qualify for those rates. Tier two is $150 per day. Tier three would be getting put on the schedule, pay schedule.
So basically, if we don't adopt that,
Zero to A and B.
got it,
Right, so that
Got
would
it.
take care of tier three, which would put that, everybody, whoever's on the pay schedule, and then tier two would be the bottom part of that. If you didn't fall in that, you'd fall into tier two.
so our long-term subs without it, so for this year, a long-term sub without a teaching education degree would fall into the $150 a day past whatever day we decide.
Yes.
So that's what we need to decide, that's where we're at, let's make a decision. So if you do not have an education degree and you work what consecutive days, we kind of threw numbers around. I'm an
So-
advocate of saying 10.
So stay for just a second, so we can get trucks and this is what we'll add to the bottom of it, which would be an or, as Dave put it. Tier two, which would be
Just a
the $150 per day after blank consecutive days in the same assignment.
I think we all agree that I think most of us agree that that could go to a 10-day.
That's gonna be the one that's a temporary, long-term with the specified return date, so
Yes,
maternity leave.
no contract,
So,
just,
well, actually, there won't be any contract at all if we do that's good. So-
Retroactive, that's how you get paid.
So my question is on that.
Okay.
Is, does it retroact back or not?
On this, I think we're jumping subjects here, but
I'm talking
this,
tier
I think
two.
it should lay it out like it is.
So it stays like this and you start the extra pay on that next day. So on the other one, does it retroact back or not? The way this one's read.
you mean 100 days for the first, $100 a day for the
Not
first,
following you.
That's my question. Does this
10 days.
retroact back to day
Everybody
one
gets paid
or
the
does
same.
it start?
everybody
day
gets 100 in the
whatever?
first 10 days.
And then on day 11,
Day 11.
based on this criteria,
Education degree or not.
That's my question.
Yes.
Is
you
this
get
one-
150,
this
or
one
if you have the
starts on day
education
whatever
degree,
we
then
put
you're
it,
bumped
right?
to the salary.
It's
Right now,
On day-
$100
on day
on the
11.
first day. And once you get the 16th day, then you went on the salary schedule.
That's what that
Okay, I'm
was.
with you.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that's,
you
it didn't
put
retroact
on
back
the
to day.
schedule, I'd like to see.
So that would be
I-
my question. According, go ahead.
Well, so day 1 through 10, $100 per day. The question would be then is on day 11, if you do not have the educational degree,
You get
you're bumped to 150.
Correct.
If you have the educational degree, the question that we have is that then you're bumped to the salary on day 11.
Yes.
Is that too early?
I think 16 days is probably it's worked in the past, that's what you do. Should do because
If you
you're-
did
you're bumping
15,
to
that's
the
3
salary.
weeks and day 16 would be your start of your fourth week. And you do-
I'm sure that's why that was there.
Yes.
Hesitant I have with that, if I may, is the expectations of what they might be doing is different. So if they're lesson planning and grading from day one, I think you compensate for that.
I think.
Not
day
after
11.
10
I don't
days.
know. I don't think.
I don't think you can because you're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. Because you will have situations where a person comes in just a single day, but then you could have situation where that person is an extended leave and you can't, unless we choose to do so, I don't think you can deviate from that.
The
I mean-
15 gets us past COVID.
It is what it is. I mean,
So,
My concern with that is if teacher A gets COVID and you come in there.
Exactly, even though
and then
this
you
is
jump to
because of
teacher
that,
B,
you change it.
hey, now you can move over there, you're gonna be in and out and back and forth. At least
If you look at
16
the 15,
days
that's
gets you
gonna
through
be
that, so.
21 days in most cases that nobody's gonna be quarantined usually past 21 days, if I recall, is that correct?
So we're saying day 1 through 15.
I mean, worst case scenario,
I say.
I don't wanna be quarantined, so I don't wanna know the
Okay,
rules.
days 1 through 15, $100 per day. Day 16, $150 per day for a non-education degree.
are we going to 10? Did we,
No, went back to the 16. That's what I'm hearing.
Starting day 16.
Starting day
starting
16.
days,
So 1 through 15.
So this deal here,
I don't know why, I'm leaning towards the 10 days.
I still like the 10.
it was substitutes,
I don't think, these,
teaches 16 consecutive days
I'm back
in
to
one
10.
position, then the person will advance to where they would normally be placed on the current adopted salary schedule if they hold a valid, we'll say, education degree certificate or how that.
so we went back.
Okay,
Non-certified
We're still
substitute
talking.
will advance to the tier 2 criteria of $150 a day.
okay,
But to Tony's point though, there's differences in what substitutes.
We're talking about tier 2, correct?
We're talking about everything.
We're
putting it all
basically
together as
saying-
one. Just-
we're basically saying,
I'll get with you.
there's no more, there's,
I'm
it
saying it
is,
simplifies it.
it's
You do this
simplified.
in your education
I think
degree,
it's, right.
$150
I
a
think
day.
to oversimplify what we're talking about, and I'm with Kat, I'm on the 10 days, not the 16
Alright,
days.
so I'm gonna read this, putting 10 days in.
I
So
don't like
agreed
this.
as this, so
I
if
think
you
this
wanna
makes
call
it
this,
confusing.
if
Go
you
ahead.
wanna call this a motion, we'll call this a motion, see if this simplifies it. Substitute teachers will be employed as needed on a day-by-day basis and the principal of each building or the acting principal will be responsible for acquiring the substitute teachers. The pay for a substitute teacher employed on a daily basis will be $100 per day. If the substitute teaches 10 consecutive days in one position, then this person will be advanced
On day 11.
to where they would normally be placed on, or do we wanna put in where so I'm gonna put in, we would advance them to level 1 of the teaching contract. Or do you want it on,
I just
mean,
think we should
No,
do,
what's
this
easier for you?
Salary schedule.
I think their salary schedule.
When you say level 1, you mean
You mean the salary schedule?
Base
Right.
0,
Salary
column,
Whatever the
Whatever.
base pay. is.
Column one,
that's what
step
you're
0.
saying.
At $228 a day is what you're saying.
Okay, yeah,
no,
I think we're
Well,
talking.
I would put them on
That's
the
if they-
salary schedule.
if they have an education degree. Okay, if they don't have an education degree,
They advance to
they
150.
advance to level 2, which would be $150 per day after 10 consecutive days in the same assignment. An example of that would be maternity leave.
So we just have to, if we all agree on that level 1, or if we wanna put them where they
Or
are
the
today.
days. I just tried to simplify,
You
which
did.
is making that pretty black and white, it's just you wanna change the level, you wanna change the days, those are basically the things we're talking about.
I still think we're talking two different things on salary schedule versus base.
No, we're not. Well, we are, but that's what he said. We have to decide, are
The
they a
salary
schedule
schedule,
or
I'm
base?
just putting at the base one, so we're gonna be at $228 a day for somebody that falls on a salary schedule. That's only gonna be for the remainder of this year, and then they can figure out what they wanna do.
and the difference from the 150 to the salary schedule rate
Is the education.
is the educational degree.
Correct, and they would be insurance involved with.
No.
No insurance.
Wait, wait,
That's
wait,
a whole
No,
different
it's
There will be, if it's over 30 hours, you gotta give them insurance, you don't have a choice, if it's a long-term sub, correct?
Only if it's a long-term.
Only
sub with a
it's only a tier 3
With the contract.
situation.
This is in the contract.
Well, we're tied to that by law, we don't have a
Right.
decision about
Tier
that.
2, no.
So, you want me to read that again?
Hold on,
did you say we're tied to that like from the beginning or through a contract?
To a point, if they work for you for so long, for so many hours, you're tied to insurance.
Right, do we know how many weeks that is by chance?
That's when I usually call Blue Cross, and a lot of times, if they say how long are they gonna be there, and I say they're gonna be here for 5 weeks. You can insure someone for 5 weeks, but then when they're done with their job,
Yeah,
they have a job.
Correct.
Yeah, that'd be hard to
So I
And
know
you
so
can't,
you're getting a good
can you add in and opt out? I mean, that's gonna be impossible at some point sometime in the year. Can you add them in anytime you need to?
I can add them in anytime, it depends when their start date is, when Blue Cross will allow them to get on. Usually there's a 30-day wait period that we have.
Okay, so I'm gonna read this one more time. You ready?
Yes.
Is there anybody want me to change days or change anything else?
One quick clarification, if someone has COVID today and has to be quarantined, how many consecutive days will they be out of school?
Just depends.
So I
Say
think
a
that
worst
falls into
case scenario.
this,
20 days.
falls into this.
Well, that depends on your family.
Yeah, I don't think we can even talk about that.
I don't think we can get it figured out today.
What I'm trying to decide here is if you move that to 10 days, teacher A is quarantined for 15 days, we'll say, or 16 days. And then your teacher B comes up and does that, so that sub moves over there.
Good for them.
Okay, if you do the 10-day, you're going to teacher A, they'll be part on one salary and then move up to the next. And then when they go to teacher B, they'll drop back down to the
Right.
$100 a day and then get through that, then they'll bump back up again.
And that's how it works today.
How many,
Sounds always been.
16 days has less of that, doesn't it?
So principals, how many teachers, have we had anybody miss more than 10 consecutive days?
We did last year.
Last
So we
year,
haven't this year.
We've had one,
secretary.
No,
one
just
miss
teachers.
3 weeks. You know, once the one gets it and then maybe they have children, then they have to stay home till their children get past their things, but with this stay to learn, I don't think we can test them if it's a family.
I think, Dave, I
So
understand what
in-
you're saying.
Just a second, please. So
That's
in
something
that
else that just got
position,
noted in the state.
that if they were out 3 weeks, that would be 15 consecutive days. If they came back on Monday,
That'd be
Not
six
not
days a week.
15 school days, but,
it'd be 15 school days, wouldn't it?
Oh, we had one that was probably.
well,
on
you
21
could have
days.
that happen.
And what I'm saying is if on Monday, why say teacher B has the same thing, but teacher A came back, so
Why don't
that's
we just make it
sub
COVID
jump there.
exempt?
No.
But if you do it in 10 days, you're going to be on 2 different pay scales for this teacher and then drop
I
back
think
down
Patty
the
has
old
to deal
one
with
and
that
bump it again.
I deal with that now.
She
Okay.
deals with that now, so I don't think it's a problem.
That's what I'm trying to clarify.
So the question still.
If it doesn't change
Number three is
anything,
10
it doesn't
days.
matter.
Yes, please. And teacher scale based on,
Alright, so if I had an
Experience.
existing motion, I'm gonna withdraw that, I'll start over.
Okay.
scale based on experience.
not step one.
Thank you, we all agree.
Okay.
Enough of us agree. Enough
So
of
new
Chris.
motion. Substitute teachers will be employed as needed on a day-by-day basis, and the principal of each building or the acting principal will be responsible for acquiring the substitute teachers. The pay for a substitute teacher employed on a daily basis will be $100 per day. If the substitute teaches 10 consecutive days in one position, then this person will be advanced to the salary schedule, adopted salary schedule, as a tier 1 if they have an education degree. Take the tier 1 out.
Take the tier
they
one.
get
Tier one.
I'm
Based on
gonna delete the tier 1 out. So
Just like it reads.
they'll be placed on,
Salary schedule based on experience.
based on the adopted salary schedule. That's all you have to say, I guess.
Yeah.
If they have an education degree. Non
Educated agreed.
I hate saying non-educated, but non-education degree will not be advanced. However, they will go to tier 2, which will pay them $150 per day after day 10 in the same assignment. Example of that would be maternity leave.
Second,
Aye.
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 So
Yeah.
got all that figured out. I'll have to help you write it.
Yeah.
But I still think there's another piece to this, right, is now, do we need a tier 3, is there anything in the policy right now that allows us to do a long-term
just did it.
subcontract, that's all in there?
Because they'll be based on, with an education degree, they'll be placed on the scale.
I think we
Right.
need to go into executive session.
Right,
to
I'm gonna make
discuss
a motion that we go into executive session for personnel matters, I can't remember that much.
Oh my God, you too.
Yeah, I don't. I'm gonna go into executive session to discuss personnel pursuant to the non-elected personnel exception under coma. And the open meeting will resume in the boardroom at, I'll call it 8:35, so we'll go 15 minutes with Troy and Tony present.
Second die.
Aye.
Aye.
Alright, thanks.
I make an a motion, we extend our executive session to discuss the, non-elected personnel exception of the coma and the open meeting and resume on the board meeting in 15 minutes, so we'll call it 8:51. Second, We're back in open session. We will take a 5-minute recess, so I will say we'll come back at 8:58.
Wanna pause that? I'm just
Do we
gonna.
need a motion now?
No, we're just taking a recess.
Hattie,
I thought
you
were
can
out there just
Dina and Amy.
Paul and Kathy.
If all you administrators can come back if
Yes.
you want.
Yeah.
All right, you got us live again?
Yep.
All right, we're back in open session. I'll make a motion. We go into executive session to discuss personnel pursuant to the non-elected exception under coma and the open meeting to resume in the boardroom at, we'll say 9:10, so we'll give 10 minutes with all the administration present and also Michelle Robert present. Is it Robert or Roberts?
I
Michelle, would you accept option 2?
Yes.
So I would make a motion, depending the contract coming from KSB and both parties agreeing, I would make the motion that we approve hiring Michelle Robert, under an emergency, whatever we're calling that, long-term sub-agreement for the remainder of the year extending to May,
19th,
Last day of school.
last day of school, whatever that
May
falls on.
19th.
Second,
Aye.
aye,
Move we adjourn.
second,
Aye.
Aye.
I
Aye, I'm sorry.